So active reading really helps me with understanding what I'm learning about like as a whole. So I could go to the lecture, I could just write down everything in the lecture and the lecture slides, but then I won't understand it at the end of the day. So I feel like active reading helps me to understand what each point is for and why I'm learning about it just as a whole. I feel like active reading, active listening, they're really important to studying at a uni level is because they are kind of elevated from a high school kind of response. I feel like in high school, you don't have lectures or things like that. You just go to your classes and you listen to what the teacher's telling you, which is kind of like what a tutor does. But I feel like in uni, it's elevated to a higher level because you also have tutorials, you may have seminars as well, you may have labs as well that you have to take notes for. And so I feel like it's all these different parts of the course that kind of come together, and you have to use active listening and reading for all of these different parts. So it's more complicated than it is in high school, but high school is like the basics of what you need to do active reading and listening when you're in university. So what I like to do is I kind of like to go to the lecture outlines, so what we're trying to learn about in this video, and I write those down first. And then after that, I go through the video, I go through the lecture slides that they provide, and I note down what slides have what learning objective on it. So it's like slide 5 is learning about objective 1, which is like identify something, something. So once I've done that, I kind of go through the lecture and I write down what is specific for that learning objective. And then also any extra notes that the lecturer may have, I go through the slides. If they have any cool diagrams, I'll definitely add those into my notes as well, just because I feel like diagrams make things a bit easier to understand. And then I listen to what the lecturer is saying as well, because sometimes they add extra notes that aren't on the slides, especially for different classes, like for a histology class maybe, like learning about what cells look like under the microscopes. They would have like a bunch of notes on the lecture slides, and I could just use that no problem. But then for classes like chemistry, sometimes the slides are a bit bare, so you have to actually go to the lecture and listen to what the lecturer is saying because they explain it all way better than it is on the slides, speaking from experience. So that's how I basically use my active reading, especially when it's the slides, and then active listening for the videos. I feel like active reading has had a bit of an impact on my learning kind of confidence, I guess. I feel like I've gotten a lot more confident in understanding what I'm actually learning about when I use those skills, especially if it's right before an exam. After I use it, I'm like, okay, I know everything. I'm so ready for the exam. Even if I'm not, I will say that anyways, because I feel like I am. And I feel like that's all that matters. If you're a new student and you're coming to uni, I feel like active reading and active listening skills are like the main study skills that you should use, because the classes that you learn in your first year are like the very base courses that you need for your second year or your third year. It's things that you learn in these classes that will pop up again and again in your second year or your third year. So I feel like understanding what's there is really good, and I feel like active reading and active listening and using those skills will make it really easy to know what you're talking about when you're in that second year course. Because I know for me, a lot of things that I learned in first year pop up in second year, and I did not know what it was. If I had these skills in my first year, I would feel way better about learning them again in my second year courses. So 2 tips that I want to share about active reading and listening is, number 1, just write down everything that you know. I feel like that's a really good thing to do, just writing down everything that you know about what you've learned so far, especially when you're revising as well. And then once you've done that, then you go back to the different lectures or tutorials that you've been through, and you fill in the gaps from that. I feel like that's really good for revising. That's my first tip. And then my second tip is when you're learning the classes, then kind of like record to yourself what you've learned in that class so far. And then when you're going through the different lectures and you're doing active reading for that, you can fill in the gaps from your recording and then record a full version of it when you're finished.
So actively reading and listening are both incredibly important strategies to utilize, at least for my degree. So in my computer science and economics degree, I'm using these in different ways. So for computer science, I'm using it where I'm actively listening throughout lectures to understand the application of how to, for coding or even mathematical based equations. With computer science, actively listening and reading, whilst it might look like just code, what hell does this code mean? I'm asking myself questions whilst I'm coding, whilst I'm completing a maths equation. What does it mean? How can I use it? And why am I using it? And then for economics, it's more I'm listening with theories and with readings. For economics, active listening when I'm reading a nice large paper, I am looking at it, but not just reading it. I'm making notes based on things that are interesting, reflecting on it, but critically reflecting on it as well. If I see something that I'm confused with or something I don't agree with, I'm making note of it because that's me engaging with the paper. I'm trying to use it when I'm approaching every paper, every assignment, and every piece of work I'm trying to complete. As if I'm not active listening or if I'm not active reading, then I don't find myself engaging with it the way that I should be. And even unintentionally, I find that we're doing it in lectures by sitting there taking notes while the lecturer is teaching, in tutorials, making sure you're taking engaging notes and not just writing what they're saying, but making sure you're writing what they're saying in a way that makes sense for you.
Yeah, I think as an arts law student, it's very important that I'm listening in class because it's not very practical. It's definitely very theoretical, and there's a lot of like content that we have to learn in terms of text. And so I found that I do really need to be an active listener so that I can really get the most out of what's been explained. Some strategies that I've liked to use for active listening is making sure that I'm note-taking. And especially when I'm note-taking is sort of, whenever I'm listening to what's been said, I'm sort of jotting down questions or maybe critiques of what I'm thinking or like what's been said. And so that really helps me stay engaged. It's kind of like this active mind where you're always looking for maybe something that you can talk about further or something that you can expand on. I also just like to minimize distractions. It's really good to have my phone on silent, maybe completely off so that I'm not like sort of tempted to go on it and start scrolling. Yeah, I think I use these strategies in weekly readings, lectures, exam prep. I use it in like all parts of my degree. It's definitely really important that I am active listening so that I am getting the most out of like what I'm learning. Especially, lectures can sometimes be very easy to zone out of if you're tired or you're stressed with other exams. But, it's really good to use them in everywhere that you can so that you know what you're talking about and you know what you can write about. Because, you don't want to fall behind, and it just helps you sort of know what questions you need to ask if you are a little bit lost.